Hey, Jay Blake, I see you're on this call. I'm glad to see you got Linda's wetlands for her.
I wasn't directly involved in that one.
Ah, well, she'll be pleased, no doubt.
Okay, I've got 10:30 and I see we have Commissioner Thompson. Do we have Commissioner Webb? Has she responded? I know that Commissioner Wakua is in California, unable to join, and Commissioner Bangs is ill and unable to join us. So it'll just be the two of us.
This means we have to function as 1.5 people.
Well, let's get started. Work sessions are an opportunity for board members to discuss issues informally with staff and invited guests. The board encourages members of the public to attend work sessions and listen to the discussion, but there's generally no opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do so during the board's regular scheduled meetings held twice monthly. First is the agenda review, and we're going to make a adjustment, moving the legislative update to the end of the agenda. Do we have any other questions, comments on the agenda today?
This is a nerd's delight. I'm so happy. Thank you.
Plenty of content for you, Commissioner Thompson. County Manager.
Chair Aquila, Commissioner Thompson, I was wondering if looking at the future agenda items for the work sessions, if your board might want to schedule time to talk about the request from Bill Campbell from Arch Cape about transient lodging tax money, or how you might want to approach that. As just a reminder, the board received a letter from Arch Cape Water District asking for some of the TLT money that's been set aside as part of the 30% of the 2.5% that's collected in the unincorporated areas for the water district. That would be a unique request. And we just gave money to Arch Cape Community Club for the incorporation. So I just didn't know if you needed time to talk about that as a board, or how you might want to handle that. Thank you.
I don't know. Do you have any comment on that, Commissioner Thompson? Commissioner Thompson?
Well, sir, here we are with Arch Cape saying, please give us money. It's the water district, which is it's an interesting entity. I attended, this is a tangential but related. I attended an event Saturday afternoon and had an opportunity to speak with the Legacy Forester program person from the Department of Forestry. He was able to have the legal authority to interact with the water district to assure that there was public access to that property. Otherwise, I don't know that it would have happened. I've sent the material to the county manager that was forwarded to me so that we have the legal parameters, not ours, because we didn't install them, but the Department of Forestry's parameters. All I'm saying is this gives me considerable caution when I see a request coming forward to give that entity money. And given the county's budget constraints, I don't see much possibility of it's going forward. As the authorized representative on the County Board of Commissioners from that district, I'm sympathetic to every entity within the county. On the other hand, if we have an entity that has demonstrated that it isn't eager to respect the hand that's feeding them, I can't imagine that this proposal enjoys any likelihood of approval. I mean, we could have it as an item on the agenda and make it formal and take a vote. We could do that. On the other hand, there may be more productive uses of our time. I'm happy to bow to the will of my colleagues.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Thompson. I don't mind it being an item on the work session, but I share the same concerns that Commissioner Thompson does. And I think this is all good discussion for why we're doing a feasibility study in the first place. And I think we'll add to, round that feasibility study out when it comes to its completion. But
Yeah.
I do not want to kind of set this kind of as a precedent that we're going to now consider these types of requests for TLT.
I agree with that.
County Manager.
Okay, Chair Quillen, and Commissioner Thompson, thank you for that feedback. I would say that, waiting until we have a sense of the incorporation study would be, I think, prudent, because there may be, if there was incorporation, there is going to be a transition period where some of those resources could assist in the transition, which I think would be very useful if that does happen. And so I think waiting, and given the fact that we did provide $106,500 to the effort, I think that would probably be the most prudent at this time. So
If I could follow up then?
Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, sir. That makes sense to me. My understanding, County Manager, is that we're anticipating that study to be complete by the end of summer, and we're looking at sometime within this calendar year to make some kind of decision. Is that accurate?
yes, Chair Quayle, Commissioner Thompson. Yeah, I think that the goal of the study is to have it wrapped up late summer, early fall, which will then give time that if it is a favorable path forward, it would give time to then execute the next steps, which would include petitioning your board for the boundaries and then ultimately a referral to the ballot. And that ballot referral would probably happen in May of 2026 if it gets to that point. Obviously, sometimes these studies don't go anywhere. So yeah, the goal is that there will be some decision making done in the fall and winter of this calendar year going into next calendar year.
Yeah, thank you, County Manager. And I appreciate the recommendation, and I think we should wait until the completion of the feasibility study. Thank you, County Manager. All right. Any other comments on the agenda? We'll move right into the housing inventory project on page 2. And there you are. Alyssa Gertler, Community Planning Director, or Housing Manager, and then we have Steve Faust, the Community Planning Director for 3J Consulting, joining us as well. So I'll turn it over to you, Alyssa.
Thank you, Chair Quila, and member of the board. It is great to see you today, and thanks for giving us some time. And I'm happy to kick off the Nerds Fest that Commissioner Thompson so lovingly referred to. I'm proud to be part of the county's team of nerds. And I just wanted to say before I turn it over to Steve, this isn't the first time that we have come before the board to talk about this housing, land, and infrastructure inventory. But what I really wanted to say is, it's about 2 years now that I've been working for Clatsop County as the housing manager, and I just want to reflect back to the board how important it is that the county has, and the commissioners in particular, have continued to lead on the issue of housing throughout Clatsop County. And this project is really one of the first things I started working on back in 2023, asking for a grant from the Department of Land Conservation and Development, and then working with all of the cities through the Regional Housing Task Force and with 3J Consulting. And so usually I end up doing Steve's introduction and describing why we're doing the project, but he's got his slide up. So I just wanted to remind us that this is part of a larger strategic goal of the county and the commissioners in terms of housing. And I'm pleased to share with you the results today of the study that we've been working on for the last couple of years, or really the last year, on land infrastructure and housing supply needs in the county. And while today's presentation is really going to focus on our county purview, which is the unincorporated areas, we're also going to share some of the findings that we have shared with the cities. Steve and I are actually making presentations to each of the cities as well as the unincorporated area to talk about our findings for each of the cities. And hopefully this will lead to some next steps for us all, working both as individual jurisdictions and collectively toward our housing production goals. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Steve Faust from 3J Consulting.
Good morning, commissioners, and thank you for giving us time on your agenda today. And thank you, Alyssa. I think you set the stage well, Alyssa. You know, this project builds off of the work that was done as part of the 2019 County Housing Strategies Report. We really want to recognize the interconnectedness across the county in terms of housing, and also the connection between housing and the economic health of the county. So we are, and you know, as Alyssa mentioned, the goal here is to use the information that comes out of this study to develop more appropriate solutions to some of these issues. As Alyssa mentioned, there's really three key pieces to the work that we did. The first is to prepare buildable land inventories for each of the cities and for the county, the unincorporated areas of the county. Secondly, to assess infrastructure needs that might affect housing development or be barriers to housing development. And third, to take a look at primarily current housing supply, as well as a little bit into need, and look at that across the county. Just a brief recap, as Alyssa mentioned, it's been about a year. It took us a little while at the outset of the project to collect the data to collect the data we needed, but then we hit the ground running in August, drafting these different inventories. We then conducted interviews both with Alyssa and Jay, and I can't say enough about what a pleasure it's been to work with the two of them throughout this project. But we also met with city staff to go over some preliminary information and really around the buildable land inventories to get an idea from them as to, you know, what the reality is on the ground. So those were really beneficial. We've also been meeting with the housing task force throughout to keep them up to date. As Alyssa mentioned, now we're in this phase of doing these presentations, and we'll round out the rest of this month and into May with final reports. So I'm going to start with the buildable land inventories. Please, you know, don't try to squint your eyes too hard to get information from the next couple maps. They're at a scale that's really hard to read, so they're more just a graphic, paying more attention to the bullets here. So really about 80% of the unincorporated land in Clatsop County is designated as resource land. So that means limited availability for new housing. That's what you see as other in the legend there. That's really farm forest land and also exception lands or rural residential lands. The county, will talk more about this, but the county is really, the unincorporated county in particular, is really made up of large residential lots that could be subdivided. That is the remaining land. That's not resource land. And we'll look a little bit closer at those lots in just a moment. You might be familiar with this, whether it's the unincorporated areas of the county or the cities. The whole county deals with a variety of challenging land constraints, whether that's floodplains or wetlands or steep slopes. Warrenton in particular has a lot of challenges and has the highest percentage of constrained land. And then all of the cities and some of the unincorporated communities as well are really hemmed in, you know, typically between the ocean or the river and steep slopes. So a lot of constraints limit you know, urban growth boundary expansion in terms of expanding out for more housing, which means that a lot of the county is really going to have to look at infill and redevelopment as a source of new housing. In terms of buildable land, again, we're at a big scale here. There's about nearly 5,000 acres of buildable land in the county. About half of that is vacant and half is partially vacant. Most of the buildable land, you can see nearly 80% is on lots larger than 5 acres. And more than half of the lots, I believe it's 51%, are larger than 10 acres. And now we'll zoom in a little bit to some of our unincorporated communities so you can see what these big picture statements look like on the ground. So here we have Arch Cape. You can see in Arch Cape, there's actually quite a number of smaller parcels, 123 that are less than 1 acre. So the green that you see here is vacant land, and the purple is partially vacant land. And what we see a lot in these rural communities is, you know, a variety of zoning. Here it looks like here we're looking at the rural community residential. So Arch Cape in particular, and I think the 4 communities that we're looking at of the unincorporated communities actually do have some potential for growth. So about 83 buildable acres in Arch Cape. Moving to Napa Svensson, and this is a little bit more illustrative of what I was talking about. But you can see, in addition to, you know, in this area, a number of smaller acres, you have a lot of a lot of larger lots, 41 of 5 to 10 acres, 18 of 10 acres or more. And the challenge with some of these larger lots is that there are limits on minimum lot sizes, or how they can be, you know, subdivided, and how much housing can we actually get out of some of these parcels. So not to mention, a lot of these parcels are large for a reason. They're large parcels with one house and some farming activity potentially, and the owners aren't really interested in subdividing their lot for additional housing. Moving on to Miles Crossing and Jeffers Gardens. Here, a little bit more limited development, and again, some smaller parcels of 0 to 1 acres, just one parcel of 5 to 10 acres. And then Westport, here we have about 15 acres of buildable land on 19 lots with a pretty good variety of parcel sizes. So those are just kind of a little bit of a zoom in on 4 communities that we wanted to take a little bit closer look at. Now I'm going to move on to infrastructure needs. And for this exercise, we tried to gather as much as we could in terms of infrastructure master plans from the various cities, water, sewer, and transportation. And then we primarily looked to the comprehensive plan for the county. And one statement, this came from the city of Astoria, that I think is pretty, you know, applies across the county, is that most capital improvements go unfunded, with the exception of a few that are funded by grants or loans. So when you look at those lists of capital improvements, almost all of them are unfunded, except for a handful. And it would be extremely advantageous to the development community, including affordable housing developments, to complete as many of these projects as possible. And only by doing so can the county and the cities reduce the financial burden on proposed development, including housing projects. And I just think this really kind of summarizes what we're trying to do in part with this project, is what are those key infrastructure improvements that are needed in order to make development more feasible on the land that we have available. So in terms of the cities, some of the findings that we had in terms of water infrastructure needs, and these kind of vary a little bit from city to city, but we saw a lot of concerns about water rights, as well as water supply resiliency. I know even Astoria, who has a sustainable water supply, has concerns about redundancy and maybe you know, threats due to natural disaster, natural hazards on that water supply, and what they would do if something was compromised. Several communities need upgraded water treatment facilities. And there's some concern just about the water capacity of their systems and water quality. Likewise, sewer infrastructure needs. Several communities need upgrades to their water treatment facilities. And then, communities like Gearhart have concerns, or limitations on development because due to the reliance on septic systems for sewer needs. And then several communities mentioned sewer capacity. For the unincorporated county, there was actually, I was really pleased in some ways, the write-ups on housing and infrastructure in the comprehensive plan was a little bit more useful even than some of the city's water and sewer master plans. There was a lot of discussion for each of these unincorporated communities and summarized availability, capacity, and quality of infrastructure limits the opportunities for housing development. Some of the key concerns that were raised in the comprehensive plan include aging infrastructure, geologic hazards, like I mentioned for Astoria, and then seasonal fluctuations, just the ability to handle those summer rushes compared to other times of the year. And then the comprehensive plan also mentioned that zoning regulations can impact housing readiness. I'm just trying to grab a note here. And one part, the comprehensive plan said that many parcels designated as rural lands contained old town plats with fragmented ownership, which may require replatting or planned developments to protect natural resources while accommodating future housing needs. Other challenges listed were the impact of short-term rentals, the challenges of developing accessory dwelling units, and that a lot of the existing homes in the unincorporated communities are inadequate in terms of size to accommodate larger families with children. Some additional findings around infrastructure. Public sewer services are only allowed to address existing health hazards. Public water services should not justify increased rural development. And the county or these communities in the county should consider adjusting boundaries or designating new areas as rural communities based on these emerging needs, and explore incentives for building ADUs, but prohibiting the use of those as short-term rentals. And this kind of, before we move on, this sets up a really interesting tension, I guess, in the county where there's a lot, and really starting at our statewide planning program that really encourages growth in our urban areas and protection of resource in our rural areas. And a lot of the language in the comprehensive plan really talks about being careful about growth in these communities and being thoughtful about infrastructure investments, et cetera. But just in a moment, you'll see about how, in terms of the county, there's been a lot of growth happening in these unincorporated areas, and that brings up a real quandary about what to do going forward. So that's the part of the presentation I'll walk into next, which is housing supply. So the unincorporated areas of the county from 2000 to 2020 have grown from just under 9,000 residents to just under 19,000 residents, so growth of about 10,000 people. That said, looking at the Portland State University's population projection, they actually say that there's going to be a decrease of about 3% over the next 50 years in population. So something to consider. We thought that seemed a little odd. How does the county unincorporated areas grow by so much in the last 20 years, but then decrease going forward? A number of factors here that I'm just going to read through really quickly. The folks from PSU basically said that aging populations moving to the area, as well as declining fertility rates in the region, will slow growth by 2074. Even acknowledging the kind of high rate of migration that they've seen in recent years. And then they said, while higher average migration growth is occurring, The county still or the demographers are still factoring in post-COVID fertility rates. Fertility rates are down across the state. That did not bounce back and are impacting all of Oregon's population projections. They also noted that while growth in unincorporated Clatsop County is unprecedented, all previous data points, so again, we're kind of looking at the last 20 years and a pretty narrow view in this chart here, all the previous data points pointed towards a decrease or slowing of growth in the future. So while there is a boom of development and population in unincorporated Clatsop County, there is likely to be a bust. And I will love to hear from you, Commissioner Thompson, with the caveat that I am not a demographer, so I'll do my best to answer your question.
Understood. I really appreciate this because our friends down in Tillamook County see a 1% per year increase in the owning of their housing stock by outside people. So I don't know that Portland state demographers are looking at the impact of climate refugees and the transfer of wealth from that California market to people who want to have a more rural experience, and people who are willing to commute or telecommute in order to avoid the urban density that planners love and not every person loves.
Sure.
So I don't find that particularly compelling, even though I don't have the credentials to refute it. Just noticing other trends. Thank you.
Thank you. That's helpful insight. I would say, and my colleague Journey, I think, is taking notes here. We're happy to follow up with the demographer with a couple specific questions. I'd also encourage you to invite them in so you can have a kind of more robust conversation with them about that. But in the meantime, we're happy to ask about those questions. Okay, let's look at demographics. Actually, the county kind of falls right, is aligned with the cities. The unincorporated county is pretty aligned with the cities, really falls right in the middle. We often look at some of our higher and lower demographics here. At the top here, we have the green and the purple are 65 and up, which is about 25% for Clatsop County, or for the unincorporated county. That's more than Astoria, a little less than Cannon Beach, less than Gearhart, probably a little bit less than Seaside, and about a little bit more than Warrenton. Looking at the other end of the chart are youth from 17 years and under. Again, this looks like about 17%, a little less than Astoria, more than Cannon Beach, less than Gearhart, more than Seaside, less than Warrenton. So the unincorporated communities, I was a little surprised, actually kind of largely reflect the population demographics of the county as a whole, including the cities. Looking at cost burden. Cost burden is defined as households that spend 30% or more of their income on rent or mortgage. Most housing across jurisdictions is owner occupied, ranging anywhere from one community, I think maybe Cannon Beach was on the low end of 40%. Most are over 50% and up near that 86%. In the unincorporated county, it's 80% are owner occupied. And across the county, less than 1/3, so less than 33% of homeowners are cost burdened in most communities. I think, there was, again, one outlier, but most are in that 30% range. Unincorporated Clatsop County, 25% of homeowners are cost burdened. We flip down to renters, which is kind of the flip side of this. You see that about 20% of unincorporated households are renters, but about 40% of those households, so just a little under half, are cost burden, spending that larger percentage of their income on housing. That's consistent with the cities as well. One interesting thing here is looking again at the percent income spent on housing, and there's a common thread, although it's more drastic in renters, but these are different income ranges lower on the left, ranging to higher on the right. And you can see that, both for homeowners and renters, this is the percentage of households that are cost burdened, right? And so for the lower incomes, the percentages of households that are cost burdened are just much, much higher. You have 100% and nearly 100% of all households making $50,000 or less and renting are spending more than that 30% on their housing. Not quite as drastic for homeowners, but still at the 20,000 and less, it's 76% of households are spending 30% or more on housing. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, sir. Well, and the other thing about the coast is that GOMAR, the general ongoing maintenance and repair, is more expensive. This is a harsher environment that requires more money to be spent on ongoing maintenance and repair than other places inland because of the effect of, particularly along the ocean, of that maritime climate, which is quite corrosive for housing stock.
Yeah, that's something your colleagues in or the Astoria City Council had quite a lengthy conversation about that and the costs incurred and yeah, some of the nuances of what it takes to be either on the renter side or on the homeowner, the landlord side of things. Thanks for that. Here, looking at rental supply, this is really interesting and something that we saw across Clatsop County that isn't necessarily typical in other places. So the green bars here show existing households at these different income brackets, and we tried to show what a rent or mortgage payment might look like at those different income brackets. And the purple bars are the affordable units. This is just rental housing. Affordable rental, at what kind of income level these different units are affordable at. So that the green and the purple, the total equal, the number of rental households and rental units equal each other. But what we see here, and it's not quite as drastic here as in some of the cities, but the communities think of themselves as having a shortage of workforce housing. Actually, that's where they have the greatest supply. But what we find is we have renter households at the lower income levels not having sufficient supply to meet their needs. So they're having to pay more for their rental, for their rent for some of these units in the middle. And then we have the same thing at the high end, for households that are renting that make $150,000 or more, there's no rental units at that level. So they're actually paying less than they could afford, less than that 30% for their units. And that ends up creating a real crunch in the middle. So really interesting. Looking at vacancy, there's a large disparity in the number of vacant units across the county, from 11% to 70%. Again, that depends on, I think probably, Cannon Beach would be on the higher end. The bigger tourist communities are on the higher end. Unincorporated county is closer to 20%, about 1,200 units. However, most of these vacant units are used as vacation rentals. In unincorporated Clatsop County, that's 82% of those vacant units are used for short-term rentals, which means that very few of the units of rental units, of vacant units, are available for sale or rent. So again, a limited supply for folks looking to rent housing. We also put a little chart here that compares Clatsop County to other communities along the coast or in the region. And it, shows a very small number of vacant units available for sale or rent compared to the overall number of vacant units. In terms of housing supply, housing type, single family is predominant across communities. Again, I think except for Cannon Beach, if I recall, unincorporated county is about nearly 80% single family detached. Middle housing about 6%, and then multifamily housing, that's about 2% in the unincorporated county. But there are also about 14% mobile homes, another source of affordable housing. And then finally, on housing supply, we did take a look at underserved communities. One of the things I mentioned earlier that you may be aware of, and I'll mention again a little bit later, is this work that we're doing. While we hope it's helpful to the county and to all the cities, it's particularly important for Astoria due to their size. They have requirements to do a housing capacity analysis, housing production strategy, and some of the information they're required to gather in a housing production strategy is what guided us here. So we took a look at underserved communities. Most white households are homeowners. That's 92% in unincorporated county. All jurisdictions have higher rates of residents with disabilities compared to the state. So again, this is just something for communities to think about when they're looking to build future housing, is that accessibility component. And then I'm sure you are aware that Clatsop County has the highest rate of houselessness per 1,000 residents when compared to all other counties in Oregon. So a particular concern there. Moving on to next steps, and I'll talk a little bit, and then I think Alyssa will chime in again. I pulled together the data from the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, which is the new housing program for Oregon, and they allocated needed housing for the next 20 years for all incorporated cities inside their urban growth boundaries. So that's what these numbers apply to. You can see that it's broken down by income, but you can see a total over the next 20 years, the cities in Clatsop County have been allocated about 5,750 units to be developed over the next 20 years at these various income brackets. Again, that doesn't apply to the county, but it does apply to the cities. But Astoria is the only city that's going to be required to meet those housing allocations. The other communities are smaller and will not be required to do so. I'm going to hand it over to Alyssa to talk about this chart.
Thank you, Steve. And one of the things we wanted to end with is, now that we've sort of laid out some of the issues and constraints and opportunities related to housing production, as well as looking at the targets established by the state, you may know one of the things we've been doing is we've had a housing dashboard on the county's website that allows us to track the amount of new housing being produced in the county over the last few years. And this is a chart that basically shows from 2018 to 2023 the amount of new housing that was produced throughout the county. And this is right from the county's web map, so you can go look at it on the housing dashboard. And as you can see, we've produced just under 1,200 units throughout all of Clatsop County and the cities, which is a good start, but certainly not on the par that the state is asking us to produce. You'll also notice that, as Steve pointed out, the cities are really the places where the state is expecting to see housing production. But if you look at this chart, you'll see through the growth charts that Steve talked about, that there's actually been quite a significant amount of housing produced in the unincorporated part of the county. And so I think that brings up some questions for us, particularly in light of the work that community development has been doing around making housing production more easy and facilitating it in the unincorporated areas, around what are the next steps for not just the cities, but for us in the unincorporated areas around what we would like to see for housing in the future. So this is the first time these numbers have been shown publicly. I've not even shown them to the cities yet. We're still fact checking them, but for an order of magnitude, I think it gives us a sense of sort of the opportunities we have and the amount of expectation on us to produce housing. One thing to note is that, particularly in the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, where it does put 20-year targets out, one of the things that methodology considers is that there's a housing shortage today. So in that 20-year forecast, the numbers that they're expecting us to produce are to make up for the gap we have that Steve showed in some of the charts previously. And so I think this basically lays out that we have our work cut out for us in land infrastructure and housing supply throughout the county, and that the county is actually doing our fair share in terms of housing production. and I think leads us very well into next steps. So Steve, I don't know if there's any other concluding comments you'd like
Yeah,
to make?
there's just this one last slide that can lead us into conversation, just so the commissioners are aware of what's next. As I mentioned, we're meeting with these different communities, getting their feedback, kind of refining and investigating information where it doesn't seem to resonate, just like some of the data we talked about today, to make sure we're getting it right. We are also asking each of the cities to provide us with a summary of housing related actions they've taken in recent years around housing production and affordability and availability. So we can include that in the reports. Just like I think you received for this meeting, those 3 reports, the buildable lands inventory, the infrastructure summary, and the housing supply inventory. We have those for each community. We're also preparing kind of an executive summary for each of those communities that summarizes that information and also focuses a lot on those conversations I mentioned that we've had with each community about the reality on the ground, where they've helped us understand where land that looks vacant might not actually be buildable because of some sort of infrastructure or other barrier. We're trying to capture that information. We'll be doing that over the next 2 months and delivering those final reports by the end of May. And with that, thank you again for the time, and we're happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alyssa and Steve. I appreciate the presentation. That bar graph was surprising to me, to see what we have actually done in Clatsop County over the last 6 years, and certainly very important for us. We need to do more, of course, but we are doing our part as an unincorporated area, and I think it's good for the cities and us to review and see what we can do better. So thank you very much. It's a great presentation. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, sir. At LCDC, we spent a lot of time talking about competing priorities. So when I see that some of the vacant land is agricultural, and I'm aware of the strong emphasis on not losing farmland, I wonder if you're considering that. And the second thing I wonder about is the impact of, I would say, forestry practices and climate change on wildfire and water supply.
Yeah, I guess I'll try to respond to that. Commissioner Thompson, you're very right that there is a balance between the lands we're trying to protect and the lands we're trying to develop, or perhaps I should say between conservation and development, as you well know. And I think that is actually a really interesting question for the county to continue to contemplate, in terms of what kind of housing do we want to see where, what kind of land are we protecting. I think, frankly, to your point that you've made several times now, or a couple times, about climate change, that's absolutely a factor in preparing for not just housing production, but as Steve mentioned, there's a resiliency issue that I think affects us all countywide that is a big consideration when we think about building housing, whether it's in a constrained area for land, or whether it's a wetland, whether it's a steep slope. All of the reasons that this report has outlined, that we have to be thoughtful about how and where we build what we build.
What a lovely answer. So this is the juicy data. The thing that I always wonder about, because experience tells me that not everybody welcomes the idea of development. And it's not always clear to me the dividing line between a passion for conservation and a passion for increasing one's own privacy and property values. So I wonder if there's any advice you can give us about navigating those intricacies, because when I look at the local service special districts, I think not just about the supply and the equipment. I think about the governance of those districts, because what I see is a propensity to expand the de facto scope of authority to include what amounts to land use planning approval in ways that may or may not be particularly legal. And I'm looking for trouble because trouble's going to be there. Well, if we talk about it now, then perhaps we can develop better strategies going in that will reduce the burden all the way through and coming out. That's what I'm always looking for. How do we improve efficiency and effectiveness? And that's why I ask more challenging questions. So if you can help me, I'd be grateful.
Commissioner Thompson, one of my big takeaways from all of the work that we've done throughout this report in the cities and in the unincorporated area is that this isn't a community where there's just going to be, free-flowing development wherever we want. We've got significant constraints on land, infrastructure, and frankly, just economic constraints as well. And to me, what that speaks to is focusing on real opportunities, looking at key opportunity sites, right? We know, for example, after doing the work in Astoria, that there are a couple key places where they would really want to focus their development efforts. Same with really every city. Cannon Beach has some target sites and areas, right? We in the county also, right? Some of our development that you see in that chart is attributable to, one large subdivision or one big piece of property. And so I think really going forward, instead of saying, let's just throw open the doors and see what development happens, what we really want to do is look for those opportunity areas where we see factors coming together, where we see the will of the community, the opportunity to invest, a market that will be met, the right housing for the right demographics. And so I'm hoping we kind of hone in on opportunity sites and opportunity areas rather than see what happens and hope for the best.
And I would add, Alyssa, and the reason we're collecting this information is also I think each city needs to look at its policies. What types of housing are you allowing, at what densities, and think about what's right for each community and whether there's room to make changes to reflect a need for more housing.
Isn't that lovely? I'm going to elevate us from a nattering of nerds to a wonder of wonks. I hope we can maintain that very intelligent, very practical focus. I appreciate the clarification, and I really love the data. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Well, I appreciate the presentation and the discussion following. Thank you, Alyssa and Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you for your support.
And yeah, we'll continue on. Thanks again. Next is our Economic Opportunities Analysis Project Update, page 64. And our Planning Manager, Jay Blake. Jay.
Good morning, Commissioner and Chair. It's nice to see you both. I have an opportunity here to present some updated information to you on the county's Economic Opportunities Analysis. The project itself is moving towards the last steps of adoption, and that's really what I want to focus on is kind of the end game here, the runway off of this into our next set of steps. And so I do have a very quick presentation that I'd like to share. Let's see if that is. Did that work out okay? There we go.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So just very quickly, I want to cover three general areas. One, an update on the process, where we've been for the last 4 or 5 months. I want to talk a little bit about the goals and implementation steps, get some initial feedback from you and hopefully make them even more effective. And finally, talk about the last steps as we work towards adoption of this and adding to our Goal 9 comprehensive plan. Let's see if I can make this happen. There we go. All right. For the public involvement process, this has really been an important part for me. I've really tried to reach out to different groups. We held 2 community public open house meetings. I know some of the county commissioners were able to be at them. We had one in Seaside and a well-attended one here in Astoria as well. I did have an opportunity to make presentations to each of the 5 different city council/commissions and tried to garner some feedback, present information to them and invite their participation. We've conducted a number of planning commission work sessions. I spoke to the four different Chamber of Commerce groups and business interest groups: Cedar, the Seaside Chamber, the Astoria Warrenton Chamber, and the Downtown Historic District for Astoria as well. We have tried to incorporate as much as we can of the public comment into the next set of goals, policies, and implementations that you're taking a look at this time. Okay, let's see, here we go. Our discussion today, we're going to talk about the economic growth sectors, the goal areas and action steps, and who are the partners. I think the partners are probably as important as anything in this discussion. We identified early on in the process that there should be some target areas where we really hope to see investment in time and potentially infrastructure and partner dollars. The first of which, again, not in any particular order, is the blue marine economy sector. It's an area that the state of Oregon is really trying to promote, and it is something that the intersection of the most important river in the Pacific Northwest and the Pacific Ocean is probably a good place for this to occur. We talk about marine construction, repair, transportation. We talk about food processing from the waters. We talk about research, innovation for fisheries, environmental protection, and even potentially new environmental tourism. The second area that we really want to focus on is the area of healthcare and wellness. We are lucky to have two independent medical organizations that serve our communities, and both of them are growing and providing additional services to meet the needs going forward. There are a lot of also increased what I call ancillary medical businesses, the spin-offs and the businesses that support the major medical facilities. There's going to be a need because of demographics for expanded long-term care and special residential facilities. We've seen construction over the last 10 years of a number of those sites. Those need to continue to expand. There's also an interest in non-traditional wellness businesses that go to a different level or a different type of wellness, retreat centers, etc. What we're trying to promote here is what I'm calling a regional healthcare hub, that this county becomes a place for people who want to experience various types of healthcare services that might be available. And along with that, our expanded community health programs. The third area that we really felt was critical was construction and resources. In addition to the traditional timber harvesting and lumber and building supply businesses that have long been a stalwart part of our economy, this is expanding and it has great potential. Items such as lumber production for local building programs, mass timber fabrication, specialty wood production. One of the things, though, that I think we really want to highlight is the need for expanded training and apprenticeship programs for construction sector employees. Throughout this process, we heard a significant amount of concern about the fact that we can't get qualified individuals to build houses, remodel houses, fix houses, and that there's a significant amount of lag and delay because of that. And people are having to bring people from other areas into our area to build. Building our construction trade businesses and employees is really important. And that really is a spin-off or a support to what Alyssa and Steve were just talking about, the need for our increasing our ability to create housing in all levels. The final of the sectors that we've identified is the food production sector, where we're looking at seafood processing, research and innovation businesses in this area. There have been a couple of presentations sponsored by ACVA that have highlighted work done in Iceland. A number of organizations have been trying to connect with other groups to expand how we do use our natural resources, our fisheries, and so forth. We also have breweries, cideries, distilleries, so you can eat and drink in Clatsop County. So it's kind of an interesting combination. We want to make sure that our food processing industries receive the support they need. There's an infrastructure issue that comes into play for a lot of food processing businesses that we need to focus on. There's also support locally for farm to table businesses and also tourism related businesses in this food production area. All of these areas were really chosen because they're mostly already a part of our community, Projections by the state employment department are saying these are areas that are likely to grow in our area. The state has identified many of these areas as areas that they would like to invest in. And there was support from our community at our public open houses and the different presentations that I've made. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We're simply trying to move it to the next level, if you will. The last part of the presentation today is to talk a little bit about the structure of what we're calling Section 5 of the plan. And that section really brings together our general goals for where we want the county to be in 15 to 20 years. It also identifies action steps. And those action steps are what we hope to be doing in order to move our economy in a particular direction. The third section is essentially the partners. And I think this gets overlooked. Economic development is not something that Clatsop County does in a silo. We have to have all of the partners at the table, and we can be a facilitator, but Clatsop County in and of itself is not the organization that's going to be making jobs or improving the quality of the jobs. But we can be supporting the organizations and supporting the businesses and sectors that can do this in hopes of growing a healthier economic future, a more stable, less volatile one, for sure. Our goal areas were broken down into 3 major categories. One was our economic aspirations. This is where we'd like the economy to be. Very aspirational, high level goals. The second goal area is a little bit more specific, and it really focuses in on housing. We identified throughout this process that housing availability and affordability is one of the biggest hurdles to a healthy future economy. Businesses across our county are having a difficult time recruiting people to come to the area to live because of the availability or affordability of the housing stock that we have. It's not that we don't have the housing stock, it's just that it's not necessarily available in the right locations and right categories and not locked up in short-term rentals. The final area for our goals are safety and resiliency. This is talking about creating a safer economy, a more resilient economy, one that is less volatile, one that provides economic returns so that we can afford to provide the public safety and public items that we are, as local units of government, required to provide. The action steps are brought into 4 categories: advocating for new strategies, establishing partnerships, and financial investments, and new policy and planning. And I think that those action steps, and I'm not going to spend a great deal of time going through each individual one, but what I would like is for any feedback that you see or anything that you think that we have not highlighted enough, we would like to incorporate that into the next set of documents moving forward. Mr. Thompson, if you would. Yeah.
Well, bless your heart. I mean, so I get really excited when I see data. I'm moved to tears when I see your work, because this is how the data are put into action. This is where and how we can make a difference in people's lives. So I'm just incredibly moved by the brilliance of your work. I would highlight the regional organizations. I'll give you a couple of examples. We had a county commissioner exchange program where we had commissioners from Wasco and Deschutes County come to Clatsop County and learn about us. I went there, we've shared information. It's a more in-depth than the ongoing month after month, year after year meetings I've attended at the Association of Oregon Counties, because it is, I think, it's a leverage point so that we can work collaboratively with those other commissioners to enhance Clatsop County's effectiveness and the visibility and the resources we can bring in to support our growth and development. The other thing is, at the Association of Oregon Counties this year, Commissioner Webb and I handed out stuff to other counties to promote Clatsop County's visibility. So the visibility, credibility, and effectiveness are all related. And again, those regional organizations are such a big help in that. So I love everything that you did, but that's been my particular focus and why I've spent Clatsop County resources to go there and attend those meetings. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Thompson and Chair Quila, I think it's important for us to recognize that there are many levels of partners in this, all the way down to teachers at the community college who are helping to train people who are going to work in the trades, for instance. That those groups, all the way up to groups like Colpac and AOC that help us share our vision down in Salem and elsewhere. So I think that was a big takeaway. I do want to give a big shout out. We did a lot of research early on, and there's been a lot of work, especially on the part of Community Development Director Henriksen, to hone this into a very solid, cohesive document. And so we are in the very final stages of getting the whole document together. But this section 5 is up there for your initial review, and we certainly would like to see any input from yourself or the other commissioners going forward. With that, I think.
Jay, can I say something real quick?
Yes. Yes,
I think you did capture all of the community partners in that, and I appreciate the work that was done. Appreciate what Commissioner Thompson suggests, but I'm more focused on what's going on inside the county and what we're doing within the county to promote these economic opportunities. So I think it was a good list of partners, and I think you definitely encompassed it, in my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you very much. As we move towards the end of the process here, we're doing just a quick review with you all. If you see changes that you would like to see added, please let us know. We would like to bring this to the Planning Commission for public hearing in May, and we would like to bring this to you, the Board of Commissioners, for June initial readings on June 11th and June 25th. So with that, I will close and offer myself up for any comments or questions that you all might have.
Okay, any questions?
Just keep it up.
I agree. Great job, Jay.
All right. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thanks, and you too.
Yep.
All right. Let's see, we've got the legislative update coming up. County Manager, are we ready for that?
Yeah, Chair Quayla, Commissioner Thompson, Amanda just joined us, so there we go.
Perfect. Amanda.
Thank you, Chair Quayla and Commissioner Thompson. Sorry, I'm just scrolling onto my notes. So the first thing is that the first chamber deadline for this session is April 9th, which is next Wednesday. And so this means that bills voted out of their original committee or bills need to be voted out of their original committee to remain active. So this isn't the full House or the full Senate that it needs to be voted out of, just the committee that the bill was originally assigned to. And then bills that don't advance by this deadline will essentially be considered dead for this session unless they are in the rules, revenue, or joint committees, which are exempt from these deadlines. And so just first, again, highlighting the main two bills that the county has been actively engaged on. The HB 3545, which is the one regarding HOA fees. So county staff and CFM, we met with different stakeholders to work on the amendment. And that's part of why we asked to get moved the legislative update later in this meeting, because we're kind of finalizing that language and getting that in, because all that needs to be wrapped up with LC staff right now. So that will be good to go soon. And then the work session, which hopefully the amendment that would be proposed would be adopted, and that would be for the 7th at 1 o'clock. And then for the TLT bill, that's HB 3556. That was again pushed to the next work session. So that is for Thursday at 1 o'clock. The committee chair, she did note, because she read through a long list of bills that were on the agenda and noted that they were pushed to the next work session. And so she said something kind of like, why are we doing this? And that was because Rep. Evans has been out. And so they're wanting to wait for his return, I think, to vote on a large number of bills. So that is potentially why that is happening. Do you have any questions about either of those two bills?
Any questions? Okay. Amanda?
And then, well, both of you were at, I was going to note for anybody that wasn't there, but the two of you were at the community public hearing at the Liberty Theater on Friday. I don't know if you two wanted to speak to that at all, or just kind of your experience. I know for me sitting there personally, it was, I really enjoyed getting to hear about the different projects that were happening in the community, and the different priorities of the community. But then also we had drafted some talking points that I can put together into a board letter that we can submit for written testimony to be tied to that bill. But I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to add about that meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. I appreciate you sending the talking points along. But I really appreciated the local issues, local projects, hearing a lot of things from our community. And I think sometimes those committee meetings can encompass, statewide interests and special interest groups and be kind of, scattered. And this was real focused and everybody was civil. And I really thought it was a very good hearing and appreciated our community showing up in force and really representing our community well. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you. I agree with everything you said. I figured everybody else would have specific requests for specific bills and specific resource allocations and all of that. I just made it my business to have them want to see us as their capable and willing partners and give us the money we need to implement the policies and programs that they enact. So that was my focus and my takeaway. And I have worked with for decades with some of those folks, and am looking forward to continuing our efforts to just patiently and relentlessly and in a very amiable manner continue to work collaboratively with them and each other to get the programs in place and to get them functioning in a way that really helps people on the ground and makes best use of public money. So I think the way you're proceeding is great. I'm looking forward to having you put in those specific talking points because I saw my job as clearing the way and supporting you. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree, Commissioner Thompson. I mean, this was a big deal to have them in Astoria. This doesn't happen very often, and it doesn't happen for them to stay the night and actually spend a couple days here in the area, which I know some of the legislators did. So it certainly is a benefit to our community to have them here and listening, and couldn't have gone better in my mind. And Amanda, thank you for all your work in assembling the issues and talking points for the commission and having those distributed and in front of these decision makers as they go through the process, because we won't know until June on a lot of these things. So there's still a lot of time to go through the session, but we're definitely putting our best foot forward.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Quayla. Very, very happy to help with that. I know another bill that Tongue Point Job Corps has reached out to us about, and then I know Commissioner Thompson and Commissioner Banks have flagged this one. This is SB 460. It's one that both Senator Weber and Javity are the chief sponsors on. And what this would do would essentially exempt pre-apprenticeship programs from the prevailing wage requirements with public works projects. And so they're asking for our support. And so staff, we've worked on a letter that I'll be sending you right after this meeting. The turnaround will be pretty quick because the public hearing was yesterday morning. And so we'll need to have that wrapped up by the end of today because the deadline is tomorrow at 8 a.m. and that's when the work session starts. So we'd want to get it in. So then that way they have time to see that our letter is in there before the work session starts.
Commissioner Thompson?
Can I just say I approve because I'm going to be on the road and I approve. So mark me as a yes and don't make me have to send an email. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay. Another bill, this is one that the sheriff had flagged for us and mentioned, I think at the last legislative update. It's HB 2467, and it's one that stakeholders are working on for an amendment, which the sheriff was noting his support for that. It hasn't been published on OLIS, but essentially this one has to do with involuntary commitment or civil commitment and just kind of clarifying that definition. And so we'll be working on a letter as soon as that amendment is posted and getting some language from the sheriff as well and be sending that to you shortly. It's a public hearing and work session that's scheduled for tomorrow. So it's not necessarily that by the time we get it in, that they would read it before they have a work session on the bill. But it is good to just have that on record, especially it would be tied on OLIS. So then when it gets to another committee, they'll be able to see our support for that. So I'll let you know when we have that draft and send that out to you as soon as possible. And then the last bill I just wanted to note was SB 458, and that was the one having to do with the study for Highway 30 or for a portion of Highway 30, that has gained some traction, and that is scheduled for a work session on the 7th. So I know last time when this bill was introduced in a previous session, I think it had a public hearing and that was it. So it's kind of exciting to see that this has a little bit more movement than it previously had.
Yeah, that's great news. Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you. In terms of involuntary commitment, I'm assuming that this is an essential fix because I know there's great concern in the mental health community about the lack of capacity to deal with anything but aid and assist criminal mentally impaired defendants. So I assume that what the sheriff is encouraging us to consider is to allow more involuntary commitments that are not criminally related. Is that accurate?
My apologies. I'm not exactly sure on the specifics other than that the bill and the amendment language would be to define that. So then that way, the services that counties and mental health providers and as well as public safety agencies are wanting to provide, that would help those in that situation, that definition would correct that process or make it more accessible, those services more accessible.
Okay, because what I'm contemplating here, and if you can confirm with the sheriff, it would help me. We're looking at not only the legal authority to allow a local judge to involuntarily commit someone, we are also contemplating using some of our jail resources to hold them since there isn't room at the state hospital. Is that accurate? And if you don't know, that's fine, but that's what I would like to have clarified, because there's no sense in saying we're going to be able to involuntarily commit someone if there's no capacity at the relevant institution to hold them. But if we do have local capacity, if we can both commit them and get funding, then that helps our financial situation, and it helps those people who are struggling so profoundly with mental illness that they need to be involuntarily committed. And that's the solution I'm after, that encompasses all three of those. Thank you.
I'm not sure on the specifics other than that, with the definition change, it would provide more access or allow people to access the services that they need better for the stakeholders that are working on the amendment. But we'll have more information once that's posted, and I'll make sure to get more information from the sheriff.
All right.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, man.
I was just saying I didn't have any other updates for you all if you had any questions about anything.
No, very helpful. Thanks again for the updates. And as we narrow some of this down, or if things get filtered in the next few weeks, it'll be easier to kind of keep track of all of these issues and bills and efforts. But really appreciate what you're doing. And again, thanks again for the communication. And we'll look forward to our next update and certainly be available to assist in any way possible.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Amanda. All right, that's all we have on our work session agenda. Do you have anything, County Manager?
No, Chair, nothing else from me today.
Okay, well, we'll hope to welcome our fellow commissioners back to the regular meeting next week. Other than that, we'll go ahead and adjourn for the day. I hope everybody has a great rest of your week. Thank you.